The decision that no one understood, rain tapped gently against the tinted windows of the black SUV as it rolled quietly through the narrow streets of downtown San Francisco. Inside the vehicle, Sundar Pichai sat beside his 12-year-old son Arjun, who was peering out the window, his face full of confusion. The city looked different today, colder, grayer, more fragile than he had remembered. Sundar didn't speak for several minutes. He just watched the world outside with a quiet heaviness, holding something in his hands that weighed more than just paper. It was a letter, handwritten, and it had arrived at his private office 3 days ago. "Dad, where are we going?" Arjun asked, his voice small but curious. "He said we were going somewhere important, but this doesn't look like anything important." Sundar looked at his son and gently folded the letter, slipping it back into his coat pocket. He smiled, though his eyes were distant. "We're going to a place most people never visit," he replied. "But it's a place that can change how you see the world, if you let it." Arjun's brow furrowed. "A museum?" Sundar chuckled, but it was brief. "No, a shelter." Arjun blinked. "You mean where homeless people stay?" Sundar nodded. "Yes." Arjun sat back in silence, unsure what to think. In his mind, his father was the CEO of one of the most powerful companies in the world. He flew on private jets. He had dinner with presidents and innovators. He lived in a world of clean glass towers and silent elevators. And now he was taking his only son to a homeless shelter. They pulled up to an old brick building with a faded blue door. No security guards, no red carpet, no board members waiting with iPads and charts. Just a woman with a tired smile and a clipboard standing beneath a flickering light bulb. She waved as they stepped out into the drizzle. "Mr. Pichai," she said warmly. "Thank you for coming." Sundar nodded, then turned to Arjun. "This is Mrs. Catherine. She runs the shelter. She's one of the kindest people you'll ever meet." Arjun nodded quietly, not quite sure how to act. He was dressed in a clean hoodie and sneakers that cost more than some families made in a week. He looked around nervously as the door opened, and the warm air from inside carried a mix of smells: old blankets, soup, and something else he couldn't place. Maybe pain got as they walked in. Sundar placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder and whispered, "I want you to see this world before it's hidden from your eyes forever. You need to understand what it means to lead with your heart." The shelter was small but alive. Children sat on worn carpets playing with secondhand toys. Women huddled around tables, whispering about job interviews and missed appointments. A few men stood near the coffee pot, their faces weathered and eyes distant. Arjun couldn't stop staring. They didn't look dangerous like the people on the news. They looked tired, scared, human. "Why are we here?" Arjun asked again as they were shown to a small community room. Sundar sat him down and said quietly, "Because leadership doesn't start at the top of a company. It starts when you can see the world through someone else's eyes. And today, you're going to listen." They were soon introduced to a man named Julio, a former software engineer who now cleaned cars to survive. He'd lost his job when the startup he worked for collapsed, followed by his home, then his family. Yet he spoke with dignity. He shook Arjun's hand and said, "You've got a strong grip. You remind me of my son." Arjun looked down, not sure how to respond. An hour later, they met Lila, a mother of 3 who had fled an abusive husband, and was now working 2 jobs to keep her children fed. "I used to dream of being a teacher," she told them. "But dreams are expensive." Arjun's eyes welled up. He looked at his father, unsure if he should cry or stay strong. Sundar only nodded and said softly, "It's okay to feel." But it wasn't just stories and sadness. There was laughter too. There was resilience in every corner of that building. Children drawing hope on pieces of scrap paper. A man reading poetry aloud. Volunteers preparing sandwiches with such love. It made Arjun's heart ache. And then, just as they were about to leave, a little girl approached Sundar. She held something in her hands, a crumpled drawing of a family standing beneath a big sun. "I made this," she said shyly, "for the kind man who helped my mommy get a job." Sundar took the picture carefully. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking slightly. I remember you, the girl said suddenly. You came here before? Mommy said you were a special man. Arjun turned sharply to his father. You've been here before? Sundar hesitated, then nodded. Many times. I come quietly. It's where I remind myself who I am. Arjun couldn't understand it, but you're Sundar Pichai. Why would you come here? You don't need to. Sundar knelt beside his son. Because I do need to. Because people forget. They forget where they came from. They forget that it doesn't matter how many followers you have or how much money sits in your account. It matters how you treat people who have nothing to give you in return. Tears filled Arjun's eyes. He had never seen his father like this, so open, so vulnerable. And then Sundar did something that stunned everyone. He asked to speak. He stood in front of the gathered group, his arm still gently around his son, and said, I want to thank all of you for allowing us to be here today. I didn't come as a CEO. I came as a father. I wanted my son to see what strength really looks like, not the kind in headlines or interviews. The kind that wakes up every morning in the face of struggle and still finds a way to smile. You are the ones who teach the world how to survive with dignity. And I promise you this, I won't just listen. I'll act. A hush fell over the room. Even the children stopped playing. Sundar's voice was calm, but carried the weight of something real. Something raw. We talk about innovation in boardrooms. He continued, but the real innovation begins when we start designing a world that includes you, your voices, your needs, and your dreams. And I'm going to take your stories and carry them into the very halls where decisions are made. Arjun reached for his father's hand, now trembling slightly. Sundar looked at him and said, This is what leadership looks like, Arjun. This is why we're here. But as they turned to leave, Catherine walked up and handed Sundar a sealed envelope. This came 2 days ago. She whispered, Addressed to you. No return address. Sundar frowned slightly and opened it just enough to glimpse a single line. You forgot about me, but I never forgot you. His eyes froze, and that moment, everything changed. Asterisk, the letter he never expected. At the moment Sundar unfolded the letter, something inside him shifted. His breath caught in his chest, and for a second, everything around him blurred. The quiet sounds of people chatting, the clinking of spoons and coffee mugs, the gentle hum of the heater battling the cold outside. It all faded. All he could hear was the echo of those handwritten words. You forgot about me, but I never forgot you. He read the line over and over as if repetition might reveal some hidden meaning. The handwriting was careful, almost too careful. Not messy or hurried, but deliberate, like someone who had practiced writing that one sentence many times before finally putting it to paper. There was no name, no date, just the weight of memory pressing into every letter. Arjun tugged at his father's coat. Dad, what's wrong? Sundar quickly folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Nothing, Arjun. We'll talk later. But it wasn't nothing. Far from it. That night, Sundar couldn't sleep. They were back home, and everything was quiet, the kind of quiet that only large houses seem to have. Arjun had gone to bed early, exhausted from the emotional day. The house staff had retired. The halls were dim. Sundar sat alone in his study, the letter resting on the polished mahogany desk in front of him, illuminated by a single lamp. He traced his finger over the words again. You forgot about me. Who had he forgotten? In his mind, he retraced every visit he had made to shelters across the country over the years. He remembered faces, names, conversations that had left imprints on his soul. But this message, it had a tone of intimacy, personal, as if it came from someone who had once stood much closer. He opened his laptop and began to type, searching through internal documents, old emails, news archives, public assistance logs. He even tried variations of the handwriting to match it to any known correspondence. Nothing. An hour passed. Then and then something. An old photo, a grainy shot from 10 years ago, taken during his very first visit to a small shelter on the outskirts of Phoenix. He was standing beside a young volunteer, someone with unruly hair, wearing an oversized hoodie and a warm, almost defiant smile. She had introduced herself as Maya. He remembered her now. She wasn't just a volunteer. She had once written a code that helped the shelter track food donations more efficiently. He had been so impressed he offered to connect her with a mentorship program at Google. She was only 19 and sleeping in the very shelter she helped manage. He had promised to check in on her, promised to help her find a path forward, but then life had moved fast. Meetings, deadlines, product launches, world tours. Promises quietly forgotten beneath the weight of other promises. And Maya had vanished into the blur. Sundar leaned back in his chair, guilt seeping into the quiet of the room. He realized now the letter didn't come from anger. It came from hurt. He stood up suddenly and walked to the window. The city lights blinked in the distance like silent witnesses. The rain had started again, soft, like a reminder. He turned away and made a decision. The next morning, while most of the city was still. Waking up, Sundar gently nudged Arjun awake. "Dad?" Arjun mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Is it school already?" "No," Sundar said. "And we're going back to the shelter." Arjun blinked. "Again?" "Yes. And this time, we're not just visiting. We're looking for someone." They arrived an hour later. Catherine was surprised to see them. "You're back early," she said with a smile. "We weren't expecting you." Sundar didn't waste time. He pulled the letter from his coat pocket and handed it to her. "Do you recognize this handwriting?" he asked. Catherine scanned the note, her brow furrowing. Then she looked up, her eyes softening with recognition. "I think this was Maya," she said quietly. "She used to volunteer here years ago. Brilliant girl. Kind. But she disappeared one winter. No one knew what happened. We looked for her, but her number changed. Her social media went silent." "Did she ever come back?" Sundar asked. Catherine hesitated. "Once. Maybe a year ago. She was different, quieter. She looked like she had been through something. She stayed for only a day. Said she was passing through. Then she left. But she did ask if you ever remembered her." Sundar's heart clenched. "Do you know where she went?" Catherine shook her head. "But I can give you someone who might." She walked to a back room and returned with an older man named Ken. He used to manage the shelter's maintenance and had known Maya well. "Maya," Ken said, scratching his beard. "She stayed with us a few times. Smart girl, always fixing the computers. She talked about you a lot, said you inspired her. Last. I heard she was working at a laundromat across town. Not sure if she still is." Sundar turned to Arjun. "Are you okay with coming along?" Arjun nodded. "Yes, I want to meet her." The drive across town was quiet. Sundar kept glancing at his phone, checking maps, zooming in on satellite views. Finally, they arrived at a rundown laundromat sandwiched between a pawn shop and an abandoned gas station. The sign above the entrance flickered like it was holding on to its last breath. They walked in. The inside smelled of detergent and rust. Machines whirred loudly. A woman stood behind the counter, folding towels. Her hoodie was faded, but her hands were steady. Her face had changed from the photo, older, wearier, but her eyes were the same. "Maya?" Sundar asked gently. She turned slowly. When she saw him, her expression didn't change, only her eyes did. They shimmered. "I was wondering how long it would take you," she said softly. Arjun looked up at his father, stunned. "Maya," Sundar said, stepping forward. "I'm sorry." She looked at him for a long time, then said, "I didn't write that letter because I wanted an apology. I wrote it because I needed you to know that promises leave scars when they're broken." He nodded, the guilt heavy in his chest. "I should have helped," he said. "You could have," she replied. "But you didn't, and that's okay. I've made peace with it. I just needed to be remembered, even for a moment." Arjun stepped forward now. "My dad brought me to the shelter yesterday. He told me about leadership, about kindness, and he said you were someone special." Maya smiled at him, a real smile this time. "Your dad. He used to be someone who saw the invisible people. That's why we believed in him." Sundar's voice was low. I want to be that person again. She nodded. Then listen closely, because there's something happening at that shelter. Something bigger than just food and blankets. And if you're really ready to help, then you'll need to understand the full truth. What do you mean? Sundar asked. She leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. Someone's been using the shelter. Not to help, but to hurt. And I think it's coming from inside your own company. Sundar froze. Everything. Suddenly felt colder. Arjun looked up at his father, his small hand gripping his sleeve. Dad, he whispered. What does she mean? Sundar didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no longer just about giving back. It was about uncovering something he never expected. And it might change everything. Asterisk whispers behind the wall. Drive back from the laundromat was nothing like the one earlier that morning. The silence inside the car wasn't peaceful. It was tense, electric, like a storm building inside a glass bottle. Sundar sat quietly, one hand on the steering wheel, the other clenched into a fist in his lap. Arjun watched him from the passenger. The earlier innocence in his eyes replaced with something heavier curiosity, blended with fear. Mia's words had echoed all the way home. Someone's been using the shelter. Not to help, but to hurt. And I think it's coming from inside your own company. Arjun finally broke the silence. What did she mean, Dad? Someone hurting people at the shelter. From your company? Sundar didn't answer right away. His mind was racing, trying to sift through memories, meetings, names, partnerships, anything that could connect Google or Alphabet to something shady, something corrupt. He'd always believed in transparency, in building technology to help, to uplift. But he also knew the brutal truth. Power attracts shadows. And in a company as vast as his, even he couldn't see everything. I don't know yet, he finally said. But we're going to find out. Back home, Sundar didn't go to his office. Instead, he took Arjun with him to the dining room and set his laptop on the table. You should see how this works, he said. Because truth doesn't always come from news reports. Sometimes it hides in the cracks. He pulled up internal directories, cross-referenced vendors, searched archived contracts involving nonprofit outreach, data programs, social impact partnerships. After nearly 2 hours, something popped up. A small, third-party consulting group named Elevon Systems, listed as a data integration facilitator for a pilot program, aiding low-income shelters in the Bay Area. I don't recognize this name, Sundar said, frowning. Isn't that weird? Arjun asked. Shouldn't you know the company is working with your stuff? I should, Sundar replied, but things slip through. Some partnerships get buried under layers of approvals and automation. Digging deeper, he discovered that Elevon Systems wasn't just working with shelters. They had access to location-based data from some of Google's older outreach APIs. The same APIs that were used in earlier versions of a discontinued project, meant to provide digital support to underserved communities. Sundar leaned back, his heart pounding. These systems should have been shut down years ago. He opened a series of logs and was stunned to see something far worse. There were data requests tagged to shelter addresses, dozens of them. Someone had been quietly tracking visitor foot traffic, accessing personal data from phones that had connected to free Wi-Fi routers donated by the company. No, Sundar whispered. This can't be right. Dad, what are they doing with that data? Arjun asked, eyes wide. If I'm right, Sundar said slowly, someone's using this data to find patterns, maybe even target people. And they're doing it without consent. Arjun didn't fully understand, but he could see the look on his father's face. Not anger, not even fear. It was deeper than that. Betrayal. Sundar picked up his phone and called Maya. She answered after 3 rings. I was hoping you'd call. We need to talk, he said, in person. They agreed to meet the next morning, but this time not at the shelter or laundromat. Maya had another place in mind, a quiet park on the edge of the city, near an old abandoned train station. Bring Arjun, she said. He deserves to understand what happens when people ignore the invisible. Next day, the wind was sharp, and gray clouds rolled across the sky as Sundar and Arjun walked through the park. They found Maya waiting beneath a rusted archway, a satchel slung across her shoulder. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. This place used to be where unsheltered people slept before the city cleaned it up, she said. Now they're pushed even farther out into shadows. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small folder. I don't have everything, she said, but I started noticing something strange when I visited the shelter last year. People kept disappearing, not just leaving, but vanishing. No one heard from them again. No phones, no social media, nothing. And the ones who stayed, they said a strange man came by offering jobs or free rides to new shelters. She handed Sundar the folder. Inside were photocopies of missing persons reports, scribbled notes, surveillance screenshots, and a list of phone numbers. One of the numbers matched a data tag Sundar had found the night before in the system. Logs that his blood ran cold. Whoever's behind this, Maya said, they're using technology to identify the most vulnerable. People who don't have families. People who won't be missed quickly, and then they disappear. Arjun's voice shook. Are they hurting them? Maya didn't answer. But the look on her face said enough. Sundar stood silent for a moment, then said, I'll need access to the source code logs and a forensic team. And I need you to come with me. We'll do this together. Maya looked surprised. You still trust me? I should have trusted you years ago, Sundar replied that night. He called an emergency meeting at his private office, inviting only 3 people, his head of security, a trusted lead engineer from his old team, and Maya. He didn't want press. He didn't want bureaucrats. He wanted people who would act. Maya plugged in her drive and showed them the data she had gathered over the past year. Patterns emerged. Most of the disappearances occurred near shelters where Elevon Systems had installed free tech hubs. Phone pings, network data, timing, logs. It all lined up. This is a breach, the lead engineer said. Not just a security one. It's a moral breach. Sundar turned to his security chief. How fast can we shut them down? Legally, they're under contract until next quarter, he said. But if you want to burn the contract now, I'll need cause. I'll give you cause, Sundar said, eyes narrowing. We have evidence that they're using our infrastructure to harm people. If that's not cause, then we've already lost. But as the team began preparing takedown procedures, Maya spoke again. There's something else, she said. The man offering rides, I saw him once. He was wearing a badge, like a security officer, but not from the city. What kind of badge? Sundar asked. Private sector. Probably working through Elevon. But here's the twist. He used to work for one of your subsidiaries. A predictive behavioral analytics company. The room fell silent. Arjun, who had been watching from the corner, finally said, Dad? Is someone using your technology to hunt people? And Sundar could barely breathe, because deep down, he feared the answer was yes. The code beneath the silence. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Sundar hadn't slept a single minute. He sat in his home office, staring at his monitor as lines of code scrolled endlessly in front of him. Not the kind of polished code he was used to reviewing. In corporate meetings or product launches, this was raw, messy, back-end surveillance code. Old scripts from a defunct project that had once been pitched as predictive social safety tech. The idea had seemed noble on the surface. Identify at-risk individuals early and connect them with services. But what he was staring at now? This wasn't just tracking. It was profiling, and it had gone dark. Off the books. Arjun, still in his pajamas, came in rubbing his eyes. Dad, did you even sleep? Sundar looked over, forcing a smile. No, buddy. Too much on my mind. Arjun wandered in slowly, standing behind the chair. He saw strange clusters on the screen: names, dates, GPS, coordinates. Is that the shelter? Sundar nodded. And other ones like it. Arjun pointed to a blinking red marker. Why is that flashing? Sundar hesitated. That's a predictive alert. The system thinks someone here is likely to be removed soon. Arjun's face turned pale. Removed? It's a cold word for something awful. Sundar whispered. He stood and walked to the window, his heart heavy. Outside, the world moved as if nothing was wrong. Birds chirped. Sprinklers sprayed the lawn. Neighbors jogged by with their dogs. But somewhere downtown, people who had already lost everything were now being silently hunted by a system he helped build. Not directly, not intentionally, but that didn't matter. It was his code, his name, his responsibility. By a late morning, Maya arrived with 2 cups of coffee and a tablet in her hand. She looked sharper than before, more determined. I kept digging, she said, pulling up her own dashboard. This isn't isolated. It's nationwide. Shelters in 5 cities. All using the same infrastructure. They call it benevolent. Sounds helpful, right? But it's just a shell company funneling data to private contractors. She paused, then added, and one of those contractors is Velan Solutions, your old subsidiary. It was supposed to be dismantled 2 years ago. Sundar sat back, stunned. Velan was a tiny experimental company absorbed during a wide acquisition spree. Their work focused on behavioral prediction for consumer markets. They were meant to help companies understand what users wanted before they asked. But clearly, someone had repurposed that tech for something darker. How could this get past compliance? He muttered. Maya gave him a look. When you're busy building skyscrapers, sometimes you forget to check the shadows at the base. Sundar didn't argue. She was right. Together, they formed a plan. First, they needed to trace who was pulling the strings, now who was running Velan's shell operations and how they'd stayed hidden. Then they had to find the people who had been removed. If even one person was found alive, it could lead them to the truth. They'll need boots on the ground, Maya said. Someone inside the shelter who can keep an eye out for that man with the badge. Sundar nodded. I'll assign a discreet team. No suits, Maya warned. No corporate buzzwords. These people are already scared. We need trust, not surveillance. As Sundar made calls and coordinated quiet operations, Arjun sat nearby. Listening closely, he hadn't said much, but something had shifted into. He was seeing the world in layers 1, where money and power weren't enough to fix things unless you got your hands dirty. Later that evening, Sundar took Arjun aside. I want to ask you something, he said gently. Do you want to keep helping me with this? Arjun looked surprised. You want me to? You're seeing the truth in real time, Sundar said. And the truth has weight, but it also builds wisdom. You've got more compassion in you than most people twice your age. Arjun nodded. I want to help. That night, Maya received a message from one of her contacts still working at the shelter. Someone had returned the man with the badge. He hadn't offered a ride this time, but he was watching. Always watching. The team rushed downtown and waited in an unmarked van across from the shelter. Sundar sat beside Maya, holding a photo of the man from an old security feed. Short hair, long trench coat, a tired but calculating look in his eyes. He used to work for Velan's private outreach arm, Sundar said. His name's Lucas Crane. He left after the acquisition and disappeared. Maya checked her phone. He's inside. Sitting near the back wall, Sundar turned to Arjun. You stay here? Arjun nodded, though his fingers gripped the edge of the seat tightly. Sundar and Maya entered the shelter as quietly as possible, nodding to Catherine at the front. She didn't ask questions. She knew something serious was happening. In the far corner of the room, Lucas sat with a small notebook, watching people as they moved. His eyes scanned like a machine, analyzing, categorizing. When Sundar and Maya approached, he didn't even flinch. Mr. Pichai, he said coolly, you're a long way from Mountain View. Sundar remained calm. You're harvesting data without consent. You've taken people. Where are they? Lucas chuckled softly. I haven't taken anyone. I've offered opportunities. Transportation to better facilities. Clean housing. Structure. Isn't that what you always said technology should do? You lied, Maya said, her voice shaking with fury. They're not in better places. They're gone. missing. Lucas stood slowly. Do you know what happens when people disappear from the streets, Sundar? Nothing. The world keeps moving. The police don't investigate. Cities are relieved, less tense, less crime stats. They're ghosts. And you gave us the tools to find them? We gave you the tools to help, Sundar said. And I did, Lucas whispered. Just not in the way you expected. Sundar stepped closer. Tell me where they are. Lucas smiled. I won't, but maybe you'll come see for yourself. He reached into his coat and handed Sundar a card. No name, just a number and an address scribbled on the back. What is this? Sundar asked. The next chapter, Lucas said before. Slipping out the back door, security scrambled after him, but he vanished into the night back in the van. Sundar clutched the card. The address was a location near the docks, an abandoned warehouse. We're going, he said. Tonight? Maya asked. Yes. Before they move whatever's inside, Arjun looked nervous. Can I come? Sundar turned to him. No. This could be dangerous. But Arjun didn't argue. Instead, he whispered, just come back safe. As the van pulled into the dark lot near the docks, a storm rolled in from the bay. Lightning flashed in the distance, revealing the shadow of a massive warehouse looming over the water. Sundar, Maya, and two members of the security team stepped out. The air smelled of rust and salt. Silence hung over the place like a secret waiting to be uncovered. They approached the warehouse slowly. The door creaked as it opened. Inside, the darkness swallowed them at first, but then, one by one, rows of dim blue lights flickered on, and what they saw inside made Sundar's blood run cold. Dozens of small rooms. Cameras mounted above each one, beds lined with restraints. Monitors displaying biometric data. Shelves stacked with tablets and phones, confiscated devices from the missing. It wasn't just a holding place. It was a digital experiment. A silent prison, Maya whispered. They turned your tools into a cage. And Sundar realized this wasn't just about oversight. This was a war. And it had his name written all over it. Asterisk. The warehouse of the forgotten. Silence inside the warehouse was thick, almost unnatural. It was the kind of silence that came after pain, after secrets had been buried. For so long, they stopped screaming and simply waited to be found. Sundar stood at the entrance, the echo of his footsteps bouncing off the concrete walls as he moved deeper into the cold, metallic space. Maya was a few steps behind him, clutching a flashlight like it was the only warmth in the building. Behind them, two members of Sundar's internal security team scanned each corner. Eyes sharp, hands near their concealed radios. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected rows of sterile metal rooms, makeshift cells, really lined up like forgotten data centers. Inside some, there were sleeping bags and worn-out clothing. Others had nothing but a chair and a camera pointing straight ahead. Each room had a barcode on the door, a digital tag like a product scanned into a system. Asterisk. These aren't shelters, Maya said quietly. They're testing chambers. Sundar's heart pounded as he stepped into the nearest room. The air inside was stale. A faint odor of bleach lingered, mixed with something else fear. On the floor was a small notebook, torn and stained. He picked it up and opened to a page scrawled with trembling handwriting. They said I'd be helped. They took my phone, said it was protocol, but no one came back. I keep hearing footsteps. I don't know what day it is anymore. He closed the book slowly. They were running experiments, he said under his breath, on people. Maya walked to a wall-mounted monitor that still had power. She tapped the screen, and it flickered to life. Rows of data flashed across it, showing biometric information, stress levels, sleep cycles, emotional analysis. Names had been stripped out, replaced with alphanumeric codes they were using. Our tools, Sundar said, almost choking on the words. Emotion recognition, behavioral prediction. They stripped the humanity out and turned it into metrics. They were treating them like data sets, Maya added, like test subjects. The Aura of it swept over them slowly. Bellin Solutions, once a small analytics firm designed to help optimize user experiences, had clearly been restructured in the shadows. Someone had turned its algorithms into weapons of control, and they'd chosen society's most vulnerable as their test population, people who had no one to ask questions on their behalf. One of the security officers radioed in. "Sir, you're going to want to see this." They followed him down a narrow corridor that opened into a larger room. This one had a wall of screens displaying real-time maps, pings, and thermal signatures. In the center was a chair with a headset attached, and in front of it, another screen filled with surveillance footage. "These are shelters," Maya said, recognizing the locations immediately. "No," Sundar replied grimly. "These are feeds from shelters. It's live surveillance. They've been watching everything." The room was a control hub, and judging by the records on the server, it had been operational for over 2 years. Why didn't anyone notice? Maya asked, almost to herself. "Because no one thought to look," Sundar said. "We talk about privacy all the time, but we assume it's only being violated when someone rich complains." Suddenly, one of the monitors started blinking. A live feed zoomed in on the original shelter, Catherine's shelter dot, and Lucas Crane was back. He was standing near the entrance, speaking to someone, another man in uniform, someone they hadn't seen before. "He's not running," Maya said, narrowing her eyes. "He's escalating. He knows we found this place," Sundar said. "And now he's going back to cleaning up." Maya stepped forward. "We have to stop him." Sundar looked at the security team. "How fast can we get there?" 15 minutes if we don't hit traffic," one replied. "Go," Sundar said. "Take the van. Tell Catherine to get everyone out." "No arguments, just move." Maya grabbed her bag, already running. But Sundar stayed back for a moment, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Sir?" The guard asked. "Download everything." Sundar ordered. "All the logs, footage, evidence. We're taking this public." "What about legal?" "Let legal deal with the headlines." "Right now, we save lives." 15 minutes later, the van screeched to a halt outside the shelter. The sky had darkened with heavy clouds and thunder rolled overhead. Maya jumped out first, running straight to the front door. Inside, Catherine was trying to stay calm as she guided women and children toward the exits. "What's going on?" she asked. "You're not safe," Maya said. "You need to evacuate." Now, Sundar entered next, his expression steely. "Lucas is here. Don't ask how we know. Just trust me." As if on cue, Lucas stepped from the hallway near the kitchen. He wasn't surprised to see them. In fact, he looked amused. "Mr. Pichai," he said with a slight bow. "Maya." "Always." One step behind. "It ends now," Sundar said. "We've seen the warehouse. We know everything." Lucas's smile faded. "You were supposed to stay out of this," he said quietly. "You had your empire, your fortune. Why get involved?" "In the dirt again." "Because the dirt is where the truth is." Sundar shot back. Lucas reached into his coat, and the security team immediately moved forward, drawing their concealed weapons. "Don't," Maya warned. "We're done with secrets." Lucas slowly pulled out a flash drive and held it up. "This has a list of every site, every person, every contract. But if I hand this over, you burn me alive. And I'm not ready to disappear like the others." Sundar took a slow step forward. "You want leverage? Fine, I'll offer you something else." Lucas tilted his head. "And what's that?" "Justice," Sundar said. "Not revenge, not silence. We go public." "You testify." "We expose the system, not just you. The executives, the contracts, the politicians who let it happen." Lucas looked around at the shelter, the people, the fear in their eyes, and then something shifted. It wasn't guilt. It was exhaustion. "I used to believe in this," he whispered, "until I realized no one cared about these people. Not really. Not even you." "Then help me prove you wrong," Sundar said. A long pause. Then Lucas tossed the drive. Maya caught it midair. "Don't trust anyone," Lucas said. "Not even your own boardroom." And with that, he walked out the front door, surrendering himself to the authorities waiting outside. Back inside, Arjun, who had watched everything, unfold from the van, ran to his father and hugged him tightly. "You did it, Dad," he said softly. "You stopped them." But Sundar knelt down, holding his son close, and said, "No, we did. Together." But just as he was about to exhale for the first time in hours, Maya approached. Pale-faced, "You need to see this," she said, holding up the drive. "There's something else on here." "What?" Maya hesitated. "A name." Sundar took the tablet and read the screen, and everything inside him froze. The next name on the list was Arjun. The name on the list. Sundar stared at the screen, his breath trapped in his chest, like it had nowhere left to go. The name glowed faintly. In the center of the tablet, Arjun Pichai. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch. His son, his 12-year-old son, was on the same list as dozens of unhoused and vulnerable people who had vanished. And just like that, the lines between his public world and private life shattered. Maya's voice broke through the stunned silence. "It must have been a flagged profile from that day you brought him to the shelter," she said, her voice low. "The system ... it probably recognized him as a new data point. A child without prior shelter history who matched high engagement indicators." "Engagement indicators," Sundar whispered, as if trying to process the absurdity of the phrase. "They're metrics used to identify individuals likely to become dependent on community resources," she explained. "It's cruel, heartless, and it doesn't see names, only numbers." But Sundar didn't hear the rest. He had already bolted across the room to the front entrance, scanning the parking lot. His eyes darted frantically, searching for the black SUV where Arjun had been moments ago. "Where is he?" he shouted. He was just here. Security rushed outside. The van side door was open. The driver was missing. No signs of forced entry. No broken glass. No screams. Only one thing remained. A white envelope taped to the dashboard. Sundar tore it open. "If you want the future back, come to where the past ended." His knees nearly gave out. Maya caught him, steadying him with trembling hands. "A message," she said. "A location." "The warehouse," Sundar muttered. "No, somewhere else." Maya's eyes widened. "The old Velen headquarters?" "The place where it all started." They didn't wait. The team loaded into a second car and tore through the city, wind rushing against the windows like a clock ticking too fast. Sundar gripped the armrest with white knuckles, his heart pounding, so hard it drowned out the world. "They took my son," he said under his breath. "They made this personal." Maya leaned forward, her voice sharp with resolve. "Then let's end it. Not just for him. For everyone." The old Bellin building was abandoned years ago. After the acquisition, it was scheduled for demolition. But bureaucratic delays left it standing half forgotten, like a haunted shell. Broken windows, vines crawling up the brick walls, graffiti covering what used to be a polished glass lobby. They entered through a side door, flashlights cutting through the dust-filled dark. The inside was a skeleton, desks overturned, cables dangling from the ceiling, the air thick with mildew and history. And then they heard a voice. A child's voice. "Dad?" Sundar sprinted toward the sound, his flashlight bouncing wildly off the walls. He turned a corner and froze. There, in the center of the old server room, sat Arjun, unharmed, eyes wide but calm. Beside him stood a man Sundar didn't recognize, older, with gray stubble, dressed in plain clothes that looked more military than corporate. He wasn't holding a weapon, but his presence was cold, calculated. "Hello, Sundar," the man said softly. "We've been waiting." "Step away from my son," Sundar ordered, stepping forward, fists clenched. The man didn't move. "I'm not here to hurt him. If I wanted to, it would have happened already. This was never about violence." "Then what is this?" Maya asked, stepping into view. "It's a message," the man said. "A lesson you refused to learn the first time." He gestured around the room. "This company, this building. It was supposed to change the world. And it did, but not the way you intended. You thought technology could save people. I knew it. Could control them, we tested the theory, and it worked. By abducting the homeless, Sundar snapped. By running digital prisons,